Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first Big at the Back podcast. So I'm here. My name's Tom, and we've got Matt joining us today as well.
Hi, guys. How is everyone? How are you, Tom?
I'm good. This game week's got me. I don't really know how to feel about what's been going on at the moment with this game week in particular. It's also felt like it's taken a million years, right?
Well, yeah, especially seeing as it started when I was in Jamaica, which feels like a lifetime ago already, and now we're back and it's finally coming to an end.
I don't understand why Watford have had two games this game week, considering they're about 2.5 weeks apart.
It's ridiculous. And then loads of us, myself included, fell into the Watford captaincy trap. So
We'll get into that a bit later.
I just want it to be over and done with. Just move on.
Well, why don't we start with introductions, then we can dive right into how we're doing right now. So for everyone listening, thank you and welcome. So my name's Thomas. I've been playing FPL probably about 8 years. I've been playing FPL and actually paying attention probably about 4 years. Everyone's got that 1 year where they start paying attention and start really caring about it. So yeah, that's me. I'm currently around 42,000 at the moment in the world. I think, as is every season, you're aiming for a top 10k finish. Yeah, that's it from me, and I'm sure you'll learn to hate me as the pod goes on. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, you'll join the club of hating Tom. Yeah, so I'm Matt. I have been playing FPL similar amount of time, really. Seriously, about 5 or 6 years. Top finish was 17-18. I was just looking it up when I was just under the 30k mark. This year, I'm currently sat at about 120k. A bad couple of weeks recently has saw me falling down the rankings. 2 red arrows in a row. No one likes to see that. And you might be able to tell from this jumper if you're watching on YouTube, I'm a West Ham fan, which has actually been nice for the last couple of years for once. So I can enjoy football for football, not just for FPL reasons. And as you'll learn to hate Tom, you'll learn to love me because I'm the one that actually talks sense.
Wonderful. Yeah, I am a Liverpool fan, so I partially blame that for not always talking sense when it comes to actual football talk. But when it comes to FPL, I think I'm relatively neutral.
And as you can tell by Tom's voice, he's a local Liverpool fan.
I think it was a classic. Grew up idolizing Michael Owen, which got me into the trap. And can't say it's been an easy ride, but it's certainly been better.
Has it been easy for you? You can't say that to me.
I believe you were leading the Moyes hate charge, so
no, never.
For anyone wondering as well, Matt also has another podcast that's specific to West Ham stuff. Do you want to give a plug to that while we're here?
Yeah, so you can also find my thoughts on West Ham more in depth on the Pretty Bubbles podcast. Myself and a few of my mates getting together every week to chat shit about West Ham, and there's the swear word, so we've dived right in. But yeah, so you can find me over there. You'll probably find links to that on our Twitter, which is @BigAtTheBack. I will be plugging everywhere I can.
Awesome. So you mentioned it there. You just want to get it over and done with. I think let's dive right in. Game week 24. Was it 24 we've just been in?
Yeah.
Game week 24. How are you doing?
23, sorry. This is 23. God, we're getting well ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Game week 23. Talk us through.
It's been a mixed bag for myself in particular. Big points on the bench, which is always annoying with Rudiger and Dalot, 7 and 9 respectively. 2 teams that never look like keeping a clean sheet in recent weeks. Obviously, both pulled it out of the bag, and even more annoyingly for Dalot against my own West Ham boys, which was absolutely devastating. I was basically saved by Luca Dean with his 12-point haul. It has been a bit of a weird week, starting obviously with that Watford-Norwich game, where mine and many people's captain, Dennis, ended up picking up a red card, so he sat there on -2. But there haven't been a lot of goals around. Like the big names haven't really been putting it out. So it's been one of those weeks where you've been looking for your value picks. So I'm looking through my team, like Bernardo 2 points, Ronaldo 2 points, Trent 2 points, Cancelo 2 points. Saved by Ramsdale and Dean, really. Arsenal clean sheet. They've been looking a bit more solid defensively recently, so we'll get onto them a little bit more later. But yeah, it's one game left to go, which I've got no investment in anymore. I just want it over and done with to move on.
I think I'm in a similar story to you, but not as much on the bench. So at least picking my 11 hasn't been so dreadful. I think bringing in Lucas Digne actually saves me for this game week. So his 12 points being the one solitary show of strength. I actually went with King over Denis as captain. I wildcarded a few weeks ago just because my team was looking hideous. And went with King instead of Denis because of the underlying stats. Classic underlying stats instead of actual FPL points. But it seems to have worked out quite well. So I've still got King left to play. I also made the really unintelligent decision of putting Ben Foster as starting over David De Gea, thinking double game week. I don't expect him to keep any clean sheets, but I don't expect De Gea to either. And Foster can at least make a lot more saves. Of course, Foster has COVID, so that's really dented my game week as well. I think not having Ramsdale, not having De Gea. As you say, the one time they do keep a clean sheet is when I've got him on the bench. So mixed bag. Thank God for Lucas Digne because he has really, really saved me from the red arrow and has got me to the tiniest green. So I'm currently on 36 points with obviously Foster and Captain King still left to play. I'm not really expecting anything from either of them, but if either of them can pick up any kind of return, I will be delighted.
Well, I think you've got a slight chance. Burnley, I mean, obviously they've reinforced a little bit in January, but they haven't been tearing up any trees. So I reckon you've got a chance, as much as I hope you get nothing from both of them, but we'll see.
I think they haven't been tearing up trees just because they haven't played since about October. I think they've got about 4 or 5 games in hand at the moment.
Something like that. It's ridiculous.
I think there's going to be a point where Burnley have a quadruple game week and we've all got Tyrone. It's not Tyrone Mings. Ben Mee, captain. Yeah, Ben Mee is going to be our captain for Burnley's quadruple game week, and he's going to get red carded on the first game.
I'll tell you, it's going to be my man. The one person from the January transfer that if I was to bring in this week would be Wout Weghorst, their new striker. But yeah, I was just looking. So they've got obviously loads of teams have played different amounts of games. They've played 18, which is by far and away the least. Chelsea have played 24, so they've actually got 6 games in hand on Chelsea. But yeah, between 2 and 5 games in hand on most of the rest of the league. Wow. So it could be the only time we are ever saying this in our lives, but time to stack up on Burnley assets, perhaps. Even then, no, I don't. And then watch them all blank.
Cool. So we've looked over the game week. Why don't we dig into what we're going to do today is, as it's the first podcast, what we're going to do is give a full review of the current teams that are playing in the Premier League at the moment. So who are the heroes and villains so far this season? Who, if anyone, we'd look to target from those teams? And who, if anyone, to avoid? And the first team to discuss, going in alphabetical order, is really interesting because we've alluded to them before. It's Arsenal. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on Arsenal at the moment?
They are a strange old team at the moment. They somehow find themselves in 6th in the league. Like, obviously, they started terribly, then went on a really good run. Then they've sort of leveled out a little bit now. I've got Ramsdale in my team. I think he's a bargain. I think it was 4.5 at the start of the season from memory. So yeah, I think he's a solid pick at that price for a goalkeeper in that range in a team that I said that they've improved defensively. I still don't think they're a great defensive side, but they just seem to be grinding out clean sheets. And I think a lot of that is down to Ramsdale, and he does make a lot of saves. He's a good shot stopper. A lot of people laughed when they signed him for however much was it, 40 million or something in the summer, but it's actually proven to be a fairly decent bit of business. You could look at the likes of Tierney and White in defence as well, possibly. But it depends if you're looking at doubling up on Arsenal defence and how confident you are in them. And then going forward, you've got your likes of Saka and Martinelli, who have both been coming good, especially since sort of that Christmas period when Martinelli really came into the side. Lacazette's an option in that sort of mid-value striker range. He's not a premium, he's not a bargain, he's somewhere in between. So, but I mean, strikers just haven't been performing in FPL this season, so he could be an asset there. And obviously, they've just lost over to Barcelona, so he's probably going to be their main man and starting up front pretty much week in, week out from now on.
Yeah, I think we've got a friend who's a very good Arsenal fan who was almost banging his head against the wall given they didn't sign anyone up front. Most of what you said, I agree with. I think they have actually been good at the back. And I think in terms of FPL, Ramsdale is the clear standout. The reason I don't have him at the moment is I had him for so many weeks. I loved having him, but I think they've got a blank in 25 and 27. So the plan was always to hold David De Gea until then and then pivot back to Ramsdale. I think Ben White is a fantastic option for Arsenal at the back at the moment, just because he's so cheap and he's starting every game. And when they keep clean sheets, he's quite good for bonus points as well. I mean, I think we all had him at the start of the season thinking Arsenal were amazing defensively, and then they lost 3-0 to Brentford in the first game. It was 5-0 against City, I believe. But after that, he started to really come good and he started to play well. So I think Ben White is an option. Maybe you'll disagree with me on this, but I had Emil Smith-Rowe for ages. I loved having him, and I think I bought him in and got rid at the right time. But going forward, I just don't see myself investing in Arsenal attack at all. I just don't think any of the players are trustworthy. They're cheap, but I don't think any of them will be able to consistently deliver FPL returns. What are your thoughts?
I don't disagree. I've currently got Martinelli in there purely because he was cheap and he had a little good run of form just after Christmas and New Year. Again, like you had ESR in very early on in this, like from very early on in the season, and he was really performing, but he's been benched a bit lately. I think with all of them, there's a real rotation risk of you never quite know who's going to be playing. So, they can be good options because they're cheap and they give you the money to spend elsewhere. But it's if I was wildcarding today, I don't think I'd have any of them in.
Yeah, agreed. I think Emil Smith-Rowe was really, really, really good because I brought him in, I think, game week 7, which is when I wildcarded, and then I had him for that amazing run of form. Then towards the end, he gets benched twice and scores 2 goals off the bench. So that's when I was just like, okay, my chickens are counted. I'm going, what are your thoughts on Bukayo Saka? Because the underlying stats are always brilliant, but he just never delivers on them.
I really can't figure him out. I think he's a very talented player. And we've seen that for Arsenal and for England as well. He is their top scoring player this season in terms of FPL. But again, I think he's very much feast or famine. So he'll go a long period of 2s, 3s, maybe even coming off the bench and not getting, maybe even not playing at all. And then he'll have a game where he bags 2, gets an assist or something like that. So he's very hard to predict. Mm-hmm. So again, he's currently set at 6.4. And I think if you're going to look at an Arsenal midfielder who's sort of an attacking midfielder, I'd rather go for someone like Martinelli or Smith-Rowe even, just because it's that little bit cheaper and it gives you that extra bit of money elsewhere.
Yeah, agreed. I think Bukayo Saka is similar to Jamie Vardy in that he's a purple patch player. So he'll go on 3 or 4 game runs, but unlike Jamie Vardy, those 3 or 4 game runs will be 1 goal per game. Yeah. Whereas Vardy, for example, is the ultimate purple patch player because he's explosive for 7 or 8 games, then does nothing for 10. I think Bukayo Saka's in that bracket, just maybe not to the same extent from my perspective. But good. Kieran Tierney is one you mentioned earlier. He's always one I just seem to forget about just because you've got Ramsdale, you've got Ben White. Worth considering, do you think?
Potentially. I think obviously everyone loves a fullback. They give you options, getting forward, putting crosses in, so they're always more likely to get an assist. And he does take set pieces as well. So he's on their corners. So he's always worth looking at, unless him and Ødegaard share a lot of the set piece responsibility. So there's always options there. But again, if you're going to pick an Arsenal defender, if you've got Ramsdale, which a lot of people have, you're probably only going to pick one Arsenal defender, and that's going to be White. He's 4.5, Tierney's 5.1. So you're just looking at that extra 0.6 mil that you can spend elsewhere. He's not a bad pick per se, but I think it just doesn't really make sense when you've got other options.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's right. I think Arsenal are very good in that a lot of their players are enablers. So you're getting a good player while giving you the access to upgrades, say, I say a very good player. There's not many in there.
Yeah.
But it lets you upgrade from a Son to a Salah by getting an Arsenal player. I think that's where the real value for them in FPL is this season. Awesome. Well, next team is probably the most interesting FPL-wise at the moment, and that's Aston Villa. So go on, give me your thoughts on Aston Villa at the moment.
Well, I'm currently doubled up on Villa, which I didn't think I'd be saying a couple of months ago. Obviously, a lot of people had Martinez last season because he was so cheap. He's gone up in price this season at 5.5, and I don't think he's worth looking at. But that being said, we both obviously mentioned Luca Dean when we were talking about our recent game weeks. So he's in there at the moment. I think he's always one that everyone talks about at Everton. He seems to be one of the most frustrating FPL players around in that, I mean, the Everton team this season, no one was worth touching, so we didn't have to worry about that. But in previous seasons, he can haul like clean sheets, assists, obviously really good on set pieces for Everton. But he's also liable to bookings, red cards, and just throwing away clean sheets. So he's one that I've got in at the moment. Obviously, the first game was against his old club. He got an assist and a clean sheet, and everyone's laughing. But he's always on that edge of genius and absolutely outrageous. And then the other person I've got at the moment as well is Coutinho, who obviously came back in January. He's played a couple of games, got a goal on his debut against United. He's got a rocket of a goal on international duty for Brazil this week as well, which is always nice to see when he's in your team. It's a bit of a gamble, I think. He's only 7 mil, but obviously that's sort of that mid-range midfielder at the moment. He could be a real steal at 7 mil, or he could be a big waste of money. I'm obviously hoping for the former. He'll probably be on a lot of set pieces as well, free kicks around the area, so there's always that opportunity. But other than that, I don't see much value in Villa. Watkins just hasn't been performing. He's been really underperforming. Buendia I had in at the start of the season. I think these are the two standout players, really. I think they're good options, but I feel like a lot of Villa's points are spread around. So there's not as much value in going for like a Watkins or someone because I think he's scored about 4 goals this season, if I'm right. But yeah, I think they're the main two. Obviously, Mings is always one that's there or thereabouts. People always talk about him. But yeah, that's my take on them. They're the two I'd go for. I wouldn't be tripling up anytime soon.
I think this is going to be our first disagreement of the podcast.
Of many.
The first of many, because I think Villa are heavily investable, and I'm considering going triple on them. I think Coutinho you need to have Coutinho because even if you looking at Villa's fixtures moving forward, it's Leeds, Newcastle, Watford, Brighton, and Southampton as the next 5. Then you've got West Ham, Arsenal, so they're arguably even easier. But I think if you're looking at those next 5, Villa are heavily investable. You also missed out on one name that I'm eager to get your thoughts on because I think is a real gem in the rough, and that's Jacob Ramsey for Villa, who is 4.5, has been starting, has got double digits in 2 of the last 3 game weeks, and is a wonderful enabler. I think you're safe to have either Coutinho or Buendia, because Buendia has been playing really further forward since Gerrard came in. So Coutinho or Buendia and Coutinho, and then having Jacob Ramsey to supplement them, I think is a really, really strong strategy at the moment with FPL. You mentioned obviously Watkins and the plight of Ollie Watkins. we all love Ollie Watkins as a footballer. We all love him. He does so much for the team. He's brilliant, but his goal scoring just hasn't been there this season. It hasn't really been there since the very beginning of last season when he scored a hat-trick against Liverpool. But yeah, probably the last time he played well, because I had him a lot in FPL since then. But Watkins is a player that always frustrates, I find. I think you could go for Coutinho or Buendia in midfield. You shouldn't double up on them. That's a bit too much investment. But I think either one of them works, and they are interchangeable. I think Luca Digne is a must-get at the moment. And then Jacob Ramsey, I think, is a really, really good option. Even if you look this season, he's got 58 points so far this season, and he's 4.6 in FPL at the moment. So I think it's a really strong option for that fifth midfielder slot, if you're looking at that.
It's not a bad shout. I don't dislike it. Don't get me wrong. But when you actually look at the stats, that 58 points equates to 3 goals and an assist. Like, for someone who's played as many minutes as he has, he's coming into a bit of form. But the one main one was the Man United game where he got a goal and an assist. That's massively weighted his points. Don't get me wrong. I think at the price range, he's probably a good pickup. But unless something drastically changes, I know they've got a good run of form coming up in terms of those fixtures. But I'd just be looking at Dean and one other for now.
Yeah, I've also got Coutinho as well. So I'm going that way. The triple up is something I would consider if I want to move someone different out for Mo Salah when he comes back in. And we'll get to that a bit later in terms of my plans. But I'm really seriously considering Jacob Ramsey as an enabler to do that. But yeah, Villa are probably my favourite team to look at the moment. So it's a shame to be moving on. But the next one is probably my least favourite team to look at.
Yeah.
Which is Brighton. So I'm just going to get this out there. Neil Maupay, I hate him. I love him as a footballer, but as an FPL asset, he started the season well, so I brought him on my wild card. Then he just wasn't being played for about 8 weeks in a row. They decided to play Trossard up front instead. And now he seems to have started getting a bit of form. And if you look at his stats for the season, it's like 7 goals, 5 assists so far, I think. So he's undoubtedly doing the job and ticking over, and he's fine. But he's just an unbelievably frustrating player to own in FPL. The only other player that's really worth considering from Brighton, I think, is the goalkeeper Sanchez. But even I think we all started the season with him. But I think when you look at, you can get Ramsdale for 0.4 more. And I think that's just a much, much better choice if you're looking at a goalkeeper right now. Everyone always speaks about Brighton's defence. I don't think it's been as strong this season as it has in previous years. And I think Brighton are always a team that really flatters to deceive. So I really struggle recommending anyone from Brighton that's worth investing in. Do you have a different opinion? What are your thoughts?
I don't disagree with you at all. I've got Sanchez in my team at the moment, but he's there as bench fodder really, unless let's say Brighton have got a decent looking double game week or something, then maybe I'll start him. But he's pretty much there as bench fodder at the moment because I've got Ramsdale. Agree with you about Maupay. He's found a little bit of form. I think he went 7 or 8 games in a row without getting anything until he faced West Ham, and then he scored an overhead kick in the 90th minute, which obviously was a little bit of a killer. And that sort of kicked him back into life. But I don't think there's anyone. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really like Graham Potter as a manager. I think he's done a fantastic job, and I think he's destined for a bigger job fairly soon. There was obviously rumours with Spurs, both in the summer and again when they got rid of Nuno. And I think he will end up somewhere quite big fairly soon. But I just think at the moment, in FPL terms, no one jumps out at you. You've got Maupay's the only really one that you'd ever be tempted by other than Sanchez.
I think Trossard, if he was 1 million cheaper, would be an attractive option. He's on penalties. He's a very good player. He really gets that team going. But I think at the price point he's at, and there's a distinction here because I think Brighton I don't mind watching them play. I like them as a team. I like them as a club. Like you, I think Potter is great. Just on an FPL basis, I can't find myself looking at any of them. If I was going to wildcard right now, I wouldn't have a single Brighton player. And I think I've got Lamptey as my third sub at the moment, and it's just it was a bit of a gamble bringing him in, and he's just not playing enough to be delivering. And it's a shame because he could be a really good asset if he plays consistently. It just doesn't feel like that's ever going to happen. So I think the Brighton conversation can be cut short a little bit because I don't think there's much more to say. Do you?
No, but I will say that I'm just going to apologise to any Brentford fans that are listening, seeing as you completely skipped them out and went on to Brighton. So
I was just like, to talk about Brighton. Just one last thing on Brighton is if you want to hear more about that fantastic overhead kick, go to the Pretty Bubbles podcast at Pretty Bubbles on Twitter. It's all there and there's a running commentary on it. Now, moving on to a team that I have avoided all season, and I'm so glad I have, Brentford. Go on, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if I've had any Brentford players in at any point. I might have had Tony for a week or two, but I'm struggling to remember. I think they're just, like I said, that big win first game of the season against Arsenal, sort of opening the season on a Friday night. Fantastic atmosphere. I think they're doing all right as a Premier League side, but in terms of FPL, I am not looking at any of their players and going, you know what, that's the person I need in my side. Obviously, Mbeumo started the season pretty well.
Did he though?
Well, he. Let me put it this way: he as a player, he started fairly well.
Stats. It's in the hit the post 8 times. I mean, if you're
he was the woodwork king.
Not scoring, then.
In the first 7 weeks, he scored 2 goals, which for a newly promoted side isn't too bad. But he's now stuck on 3 goals and 3 assists for the season. He's cheap, so that's why a lot of people sort of flocked to him early on. But I think, like you said, the underlying stats are there, but I don't necessarily think he passes the eye test, for me anyway. And then Tony's the other option that people have sort of brought in and out. He scored in their last 2 games now against United and Wolves, so he could potentially be finding a bit of form, but has the winter break come at the wrong time for him. It'll be interesting to see if he plays today. As we're recording this, it's FA Cup 4th round Saturday. They play Everton. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays there and if he picks anything up in terms of goals or assists, because if he does find form, he is a dangerous player. Like, you look at him as a striker, he's a sort of striker that defenders wouldn't want to be playing against. He's big, he's physical, he's quick, and he has got a good finish. But their fixtures aren't looking particularly great at the moment. I don't think I'd be looking to bring anyone in.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at their fixtures, the next one is Man City away, which is the toughest fixture. Then you've got Palace at home, not easy, Arsenal away, and then it gets easier after those 3 with Newcastle, Norwich, Burnley.
That's where you'd look.
I don't think you would look. I think this is a bit... You've had a go at me for this previously, but I think Ivan Toney has arguably been the biggest disappointment this season, because he came in and we're expecting him to be like Bamford was last year, like Watkins was last year, that kind of quality. And he just hasn't. And everything Brentford do going forward goes through Toney. Everything is designed to give him chances. And he just misses and misses and misses. I think he's on 5 Premier League goals so far this year. So 1 in every 4 games. For a guy that everything goes through him and he's meant to be the main man. He scored so much last season. I think he's been a huge disappointment. I think in the Championship, he found his level. And I don't think he's investable from an FPL standpoint, especially... I don't think he was investable when every striker was playing rubbish. Now that you've got some strikers potentially moving back into form, some that we know will move back into form, I think Ivan Toney is just an absolute no-go. And I agree, there's no one else in Brentford that's worth even considering.
Is Ivan Toney the new Alexander Mitrovic?
Potentially, yeah. That's a very good comparison. Look, my dad's a Fulham fan. I love Mitrovic, but he's just never done it in the Premier League. Who knows?
Too good for the Championship, not good enough for the Premiership.
Yeah, that's exactly the level, and that's exactly what we're talking about. So I think that's all that we can say about Brentford. Making sure I'm not missing anyone else again this time. The next team is Burnley. Everyone's
Here we go.
team. Here we go. So talk to me about the upcoming triple captain on Max Cornet.
They're a strange bunch this season, aren't they? It feels like it might finally be their time to wave goodbye to the Premier League, but they've got so many games in hand, and Sean Dyche has got such a record that you can't write them off. It's like you say, Cornet has probably been their only sort of consistent performer. Obviously, he's been away at the African Cup of Nations now as well, so he's missed the last couple of games. He had a fairly solid start. I remember him scoring a couple of goals. I can't remember who it was against now, and I think he performed quite well against City in a game. He's almost the antithesis of a Burnley player. He's a flair player. He's got style. So I think he's one to maybe keep an eye out on in the future when they do have a lot of game weeks coming up. I mean, their run of fixtures at the moment, like their next few are Man U, Liverpool, and then Brighton and Spurs in a double, and then Palace and Chelsea. So, I mean, that's just do not touch.
Yeah.
Like I said a little bit earlier, the one player I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Wout Weghorst, who's come in to replace Chris Wood. He's come with a fairly decent record from Wolfsburg. So if he can start off well, I think he's one to keep an eye on, especially as their fixtures start piling up and they get triple game weeks.
Yeah, I've not seen much of Weghorst play, but from he's a 29-year-old big striker. I think he's 6'6" or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
From what I've read, he's come in the top 4 goal scorers in Germany for the last 4 seasons in a row or something. Very consistent, good at finding the net. And I think upgrading Chris Wood wouldn't be difficult. So I think if Burnley can start providing him the way they provided Chris Wood at the back end of last season, they've got a really good chance of staying up. Burnley are the boring team in the Premier League, aren't they? I love football, but Burnley can fuck off.
Just a lovely bit of an in-betweeners throwback.
Exactly. I think that sums them up quite well. No one really likes watching them play. No one enjoys watching Burnley play. Max Cornet has been the standout because he's been very entertaining, but aside from that, I don't think Burnley are investable. Even if they have a string of double game weeks, Cornet is the only player that I'd be going near. And they've obviously got all their games since Cornet left cancelled, and now he's back. So I'm not sure how many COVID cases they actually had. But I think he's the only player I'd consider going for, realistically. Yeah. Awesome. Next on the list, this is going to be an interesting one. Your thoughts, Chelsea?
Chelsea, the team that gave us the big at the back.
Inspiration, our name.
Yeah, obviously the wing backs played a massive part earlier in this season, which has sort of fallen away a little bit now. They've been shipping more goals. So it's been a little bit harder to sort of double up on their defence. Then they've had Chilwell's now out for the season. James has picked up a knock. So it's then the likes of Alonso, Azpilicueta playing in those fullback roles. Silva and Rudiger have both been fairly consistent. I've still got Rudiger in my team, although on my bench last week. Damn it. But I think, they were ones that a lot of people have been looking at defensively and not so much offensively, because they tend to share their goals around quite a lot. And especially when they've had Lukaku out with injury, they've been playing a false 9, whether that's someone like Havertz through the middle or Ziyech through the middle. But a lot of their goals have been coming from their wingers and their the players in the 10. So, I mean, a lot of people had big hopes for Lukaku coming back into the league. I think he had a couple of good games, and especially when he first came in, I think his debut was against Arsenal. He scored against Arsenal. But he's sort of obviously been in and out with injuries, had a little bit of a falling out with the manager. So he's hard. It's impossible to justify bringing him in on his price tag at the moment, especially where they're obviously now off to the Club World Cup. So they're missing the next couple of weeks. So they've got 3 blanks in the next 5 game weeks. So at the moment, you're looking at shipping them out as much as possible. It then depends what you do when you bring them back. Mount is probably their best value asset at the moment. But I don't think I like Mount. I think he's a really good player, but I just never look at him and think, yeah, you're an FPL get for me.
I agree. And I've had Mount at points during the season, and he's the kind of player he'll get an assist here, a goal there, and then a 2-point. And that's the average 3 games. So he'll get 1 assist, 1 goal every 3 games or so. But he's someone that will keep ticking over. And I think once he's hit the heights this season, which was like game week 8 or something, and he didn't play the 3 game weeks before that. So I think Mason Mount is always a really difficult one to justify making a move for an FPL unless you're going on a wild card. Big at the back, RIP. Everyone, I think, had Reece James for a long time. I had him when he stopped performing, so I missed out the big weeks, and I had him for the bad weeks. Chilwell was fantastic for me and you, I think, when we both owned him earlier in the year. He was consistently getting a goal or assist and a clean sheet every single game. I loved owning him, and I think he's been a real loss for them. I completely agree about Lukaku. He's an absolute no-go as far as I'm concerned. I don't think he'll be starting every game for them. I don't think he'll be in the team, in and around the team. I actually think the players around him are better. I'd really struggle to justify any of the midfielders other than Mason Mount. And I know Kovacic was very good for parts of the season. He's always a brilliant player, but from an FPL perspective, he was very good for a while. But then you're looking at Ziyech, Pulisic, Havertz, and those poor people that captained Havertz over Salah. But I'm looking at those, and I can't see any way that even in... So they're out for 3 of the next 4 game weeks. They're not investable right now. And admittedly, the one they're back is Crystal Palace, but that's when loads of other teams have doubles. So it's when they get back from the Club World Cup, their fixtures are Burnley, Newcastle, Norwich. That, for me, says I need to have Chelsea players. I'm just really struggling to think who could I possibly bring in from that Chelsea side that I know will get me returns. And that's where I'm really struggling.
Hopefully James is fit and firing by then.
Yeah, fit and firing, back to getting 2 points a game for me.
That's the dream.
Awesome. Well, Chelsea, because they're not playing for a while, I think they're a bit of a difficult one. Crystal Palace. Now, at the very beginning of the season, said Crystal Palace are going to get relegated. I thought they'd lost most of their squad. Most of their senior players had all gone. I didn't think they were worth investing in from an FPL standpoint, and I thought they were dead and buried before the season had started. Patrick Vieira's never done a management job, clearly doesn't know what he's doing. Another legend trying to be good, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer-esque. It's just not going to work. I've got some egg on my face now. So talk to me. What are your thoughts on Palace?
Well, if it makes you feel any better, you're not the only one. Back on the Pretty Bubbles podcast at the start of this season, we did our season-long predictions, including the teams we thought would get relegated, and I included Crystal Palace in my teams to go down. Like you, I thought they'd lost a lot of their senior players. Vieira's come in; he's unproven in the Premier League. He's managed in America, a little bit in France. It's an unknown entity. I think fair play to him. He's come in. They're playing a lot better football than they did under Roy Hodgson, which is hardly a surprise and not much of a bar to get over. But I still think from an FPL standpoint, other than Conor Gallagher, there's not a lot of investment opportunity there. I think their fixtures coming up are nice. Norwich, Brentford, a double with Chelsea and Watford, and then Burnley. So that is some tasty looking fixtures. I haven't got anyone in at the moment. I think Edouard is a good player, but I think they've got too much competition in their forward spots. Like they've got their 4 strikers, Edouard, Benteke, Ayew and Mateta, and they rotate a lot. We played them just before the winter break, and I think all 4 of them were on the pitch at some point during that game. So it's so hard to know who's going to play each week. And you can see that, not so much Mateta. I mean, they just actually signed him on a permanent because he was on loan. They've just made him into a permanent signing. But you look at the way their points are spread. Edouard's got 77, Benteke 54, and Ayew's on 47. So they're really spreading the points across them. So I don't think there's anyone. If I was going to go for any of them, it would be Edouard, but he is the most expensive. But I just don't think, apart from maybe right now, where you could probably take a gamble on one of them, just with these fixtures coming up, I just don't see any long-term potential there.
I mean, the fixtures are really important because you mentioned they're really good. And actually, they stay quite good as well. I mean, in the next 7 game weeks, they've got Norwich, Brentford, Watford, Burnley, and Newcastle. And they also play Man City and Chelsea and Wolves. But the Chelsea is a double with Watford. So, you take that any day of the week, given Watford at the moment. I always feel like FPL managers have a love-hate relationship with Wilf Zaha. Now, I've just pretty much avoided him since 2018, essentially, when he burns me then. And here's the thing. He always has the potential to do well. And I think in that Palace team at the moment, he's doing well. Gallagher's injured at the moment. Is he worth looking at given the fixtures they have coming up?
Yes, he is. I don't think he's been at his best this season. Like some seasons, in the previous couple of seasons, he's tends to be another one of those purple patch players. But when he does have those purple patches, he's almost unplayable. He can be a fantastic footballer. And the difference in previous seasons was he was basically their only outlet. He was their main man, and he was the only one getting anything. Now I feel like he's got more of a team around him. He's not so much that standout, especially when Gallagher's been performing the way he has. A slightly different role, a little bit more of a deeper player. But when you look at his FPL returns, you can't argue with those. And also, he's got more options around him up front, whether it's Edouard or Benteke or Ayew or Mateta or any of those 4. So he's not really the main man from an attacking outlet standpoint. So that's why.
Is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing?
No, it's not a bad thing at all. I think it's good that he's got more. It's not all on his shoulders, so he doesn't have to do it all himself. But that almost played into his hands from an FPL standpoint previously. Whereas now, let me have a look at his stats this season. He has got 5 goals and an assist after 23 game weeks. So that's below his usual performance levels. And most of those were fairly early on in the season as well. And he's always prone to a moment of madness. It was against you guys that he got sent off. So current fixtures aside, like you, I've been burnt before. I don't want to go there again.
Yeah, completely agree. And as much as I talk about it, I won't be going with Wilf Zaha, even though the fixtures look amazing. But yeah, Conor Gallagher is the obvious one to bring in. He's been a star this season. He's been brilliant. He's been consistent as well. Every 3 games or something like that, he's looking like he's getting double digits or 9 points plus. So I think he's been brilliant. If he wasn't injured, he'd be in my team instantly. The next 2 teams, one makes me very happy and one makes me very sad. I think you and the listeners can guess which is which. So we're going to start with Everton.
Oh,
This makes me so giddy. It's unbelievable. Just because they have been so bad. They've been awful. I don't know. I mean, Rafa Benitez clearly was doing an agent's job. He's still a Liverpool man through and through. Falling out, but as a club, the way they're run just is ridiculous. Have a manager falling out with one of your best players, sell that best player because the manager fell out, then sack the manager a week later. There's no strategy. There's no. I think they've spent so much money and they've basically recouped none of it. They've just brought in Dele Alli, which I think the jury's out on that one. I don't think he's nearly the player he was 5-6 years ago. I just don't. Even DCL, who I think we all love as an FPL assets, I don't think any of them are even remotely investable right now. And that's even with their fixtures looking really good. I think their next 3 are Newcastle, Leeds and Southampton. But I just don't think any of them are investable whatsoever. And I actually wouldn't fancy them in any of their next 7 games. And that includes Watford at the end. Okay, I'd fancy them in one of the next 7 games. But yeah, what do you think on Everton at the moment?
I'm going to keep an eye on them. obviously Lampard's just taken over, so there's always potential for a new manager bounce. I think Dele Alli's worth keeping an eye on. If Lampard can get the best out of him, like we saw a few years ago, then he could have potential as an FPL asset. He's 6.2 million, so it's a fairly cheap midfielder for someone that we playing fairly advanced. They had a couple of assets earlier in the season, like Gray and Townsend, that people were sort of bringing in and bringing out, and they were coming and going. They had a good game here and a bad game there. But yeah, like you, I don't think right now, as things stand, there's no one you'd bring in. Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, obviously in previous seasons, have been very good assets at different times. Calvert-Lewin last season was fantastic, pretty much in the template team. But yeah, I think at the moment it's very much a watch this space with how Lampard gets on.
Yeah, agree with that. And I think from an FPL standpoint, there's no way you can look at any of the defensive assets as a general rule. I think it's got to be the forward-looking assets. I think we'd all love Dominic Calvert-Lewin to come back into form and start being a great asset, considering how bad the striking options have been this year. But unfortunately, I don't really see it happening. And you mentioned Dele Alli. I'm not sure he plays every game at the moment. So if you're thinking about getting him, I'd wait a few weeks, like you said, because I think Dele Alli, with every manager that's come in, and there's been a lot that have come and gone at Spurs, but with every single one, they've all played him for a few games, then realised, oh, wait, he's not very good, and then just drops him straight back to the bench. And there's got to be a point when it's not the managers, it's the player. And I think that is the case with Dele Alli. So I think that's worth waiting on. I think there's not much investability in there at the moment, except perhaps DCL if he starts picking up form. But even now, I think that's a bit of a questionable decision if you're looking at it right now.
Definitely.
Cool. The next one does make me sad, though, which is Leeds. And I say this makes me sad because last season they were so good, not just on FPL, but they were so brilliant to watch. They attacked, they were fearless, they drove at teams. Stuart Dallas getting 19 points against Man United or Man City, sorry, when everyone benched him. Just Leeds were stuff of dreams. Now, this season it's been so different because they haven't had any of the players. Bamford's been injured for basically the whole season, and he was fantastic for them. Dallas is out. All of their defenders have been out. Rafinha's a brilliant player. I love him. I think he's really top class, and I'd love him at Liverpool. I'd absolutely adore him to come to Liverpool. But he can't do it all himself, and a lot of the time he's trying to. I've had Rafinha for a lot of this season because I love him as a player, and I think as an asset, he's actually should be doing better than he is, but he's still doing well. But I know you feel pretty much the same as me about Rafinha. Is there anyone else at Leeds that could strike your fancy or could be seen as good?
Not really, no. I mean, if it was down to me, I always say, if I was wildcarding now, who would I be looking at? Rafinha is the only one for me. 8 goals and 2 assists so far this season. He's been fairly consistent in a struggling side. You bear in mind they're only just outside the relegation zone at the moment. Their strikers, obviously with Bamford's injury, that's been a massive struggle for them. Any team that you lose your talismanic striker, it's going to be a struggle from then on out. Mm-hmm. Rodrigo hasn't been able to fill those boots. Neither of any of the youngsters. Greenwood got a little bit of a run out against West Ham a couple of weeks ago in the FA Cup, but hasn't really been getting a go in the league. The only one that's ever done anything recently is Jack Harrison scored a hat-trick against West Ham. You're welcome. First time he's ever scored a career hat-trick. But other than that, I don't think Meslier was an option last season. A lot of people had him in, but they're struggling so much defensively, especially with injuries like Junior Firpo's out, Cooper's out. Eiling's been out at different points. Llorente's just coming back from injury. There's no one there I'm looking at that's not Rafinha.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's a shame because love Leeds, love the way they play football, love the way the team sets up. It's just FPL-wise, Rafinha's the only one that's worth considering from our perspectives, I think. That said, if Jack Harrison can start bringing back a bit of form like that hat-trick against West Ham, if he can start doing that more consistently, he was very good last year. So maybe there is a light there. And I think Dan James that's there came from United as well? Would love him to start doing well as well. I think he's very good. Just needs a bit more time to settle in.
Also needs more in product for me. He's a runner. He's a real runner. He's like a Dharma Traore for me. He's a lot of running, not much in product.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cool. So the next one is one that we both found a bit tricky, and that's Leicester. So talk to me about your feelings on Leicester.
I mean, we've obviously spoken about Vardy. He's injured at the moment, so you're not looking at him. But he's been their main man for years now, back to obviously when they won the league. He's, like you say, purple patch. If he's on form, he's almost someone you have to have in your team because you can rely on him scoring, like, if not every week, then every other week. But he's struggled a bit more this season. Obviously, he's getting on a bit now. He's into sort of his mid-30s, so his career is sort of winding down a little bit. Iheanacho is there in the background, who's always your mate, Ian Nacho. He's one that's definitely worth keeping an eye on, but I just think at the moment they're very inconsistent. It's the only one I'd be looking at really right now is James Madison, who I think is a fantastic player. His set pieces, maybe Tielemans as well, but if I was going to go for one or the other, I'd be going for Madison purely for like the set pieces. He's on corners duty and things like that. So I think he's probably their best asset at the moment. They've got a bit of a few hard fixtures coming up. So, and I wouldn't look at anyone from a defensive standpoint. Like they've just been so poor defensively this season.
Well, I think Fofana being out at the very beginning of the season really hurt them, and they haven't really recovered. I think with Leicester, you're looking for a saving grace because everyone likes Leicester as a team, right? But if you look, then fixtures are like Liverpool away, West Ham at home, Wolves away, then a blank. Then they've got Leeds, but then it's Arsenal. And they're just in a really, really, really difficult run of form at the moment. And I agree completely on Vardy. If you can catch him at the best time, then he's great. But he is a drop in and drop out of your team type of player. They've got James Justin back now, and we love James Justin. He did some fantastic things for us last year. And if the fixtures work better, I'd be bringing him in. But James Madison's interesting because I think he's a player that really flatters to deceive. And I think he's had 2 really big hauls this season. Problem is, those hauls have come 2 games in a row against Watford at home and Newcastle at home. He's not going to, and that's when both of those teams were at their worst. He's not going to play Watford at home and Newcastle at home every week in the Premier League. Those are the 2 best fixtures he could have possibly played in. I think he's just a player that will consistently trickle on. He'll get something every 3 games and then something big every 10 games. For me, I really don't like him as an FPL asset. And if you're looking at the people in his price bracket, you've got Coutinho and Buendia. You've got the Arsenal guys slightly cheaper, even Bukayo Saka. I think there are better options. Diogo Jota, who I know we'll speak about in a bit. There are just better options in that 7 to 8 bracket. And I think that's where I struggle with James Madison. He's not good enough to justify his price in FPL.
Yeah, that's understandable. I don't disagree with you, but
yeah, I think that's all there is really to say on Leicester. I mean, looking at the next team, maybe you should start on this one. It's Liverpool. So talk to me.
I mean, you can basically look at anyone on the Liverpool side and make an argument for bringing them in. Really, the only sort of downside is you can only have 3 players. So it'll be interesting to see how people go, especially obviously a lot of people have shipped Salah out for African Cup of Nations. He's going to be a must-have coming back in. It'll be interesting to see if he's back and ready for it's Thursday night you guys play against Leicester. Obviously, Mane and Salah are both in the African Cup of Nations final tomorrow. Whoever wins that, I think Klopp was saying they will go to their home country for a parade, and they'll probably be back in England sort of Wednesday. So whoever wins almost is certainly not going to be available for Thursday, and the other one might be back. But obviously, they've played a lot of football over the last few weeks, so it's going to be very much a case of watch this space. But obviously, everyone's looking at this double game week coming up of Norwich and Leeds and just going, triple captain, is it Salah? Is it Trent? There's your two options. But the other one that's been bubbling around under the surface and his ownership is nowhere near as high as it was is Andy Robertson.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. What I'm thinking,
and he is a man in form.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of doing in my team actually is dropping Jota and dropping a defender to bring in Robertson to have the double up with Trent and then bring Salah back for the double. That's an interesting question because as the third Liverpool asset, Jota really isn't in fantastic form at the moment. And we love Jota. He's kind of trickling away, a goal here, an assist there, but he hasn't really taken the bull by the horns. And I'm actually thinking, is Andy Robertson at the moment in FPL better value? Because I think Jota's 8 million as a midfielder, Robertson's 7 as a defender. I guess the nervousness about that move comes in the fact that there aren't a whole load of midfielders I'd like in, whereas defenders, there's quite a lot of defenders because we are going big at the back. So what are your thoughts around that and the Jota versus Robertson debates?
I agree that it's probably worth looking at doubling up on Trent and Robertson at the moment. I mean, you look at Robertson's last 4 games that he's actually played in. He didn't play against Leicester or Chelsea. He's got 4 assists in his last 3 games, so 2 against Palace, 1 against Brentford, and 1 against Spurs. So he really is a man in form at the moment. And with these games coming up, you got to be fancying to keep a fair few clean sheets as well. So I think you're going to get more bang for your buck with Robertson than you are with Jota, who's more likely to be not as a bit part player in terms of the amount of minutes he gets, but obviously he's going to be sharing the limelight with Salah and Mane. So I think Robertson's probably the better way to go.
Because when Salah, Mane and Jota are all playing, we score for fun. I think the first 12 games of the season, we scored 3+ in all of them or something like that. And it's just giving me a nosebleed thinking about the amount of big chances that Diogo Jota will have against Norwich and Leeds in the double. So he'll probably miss most of them, but just can you imagine not having Diogo Jota for that double? That
no,
really hurts.
But you've got to make a decision somewhere, haven't you? Because you could easily watch Robertson get 2 clean sheets and 3 assists in those 2 games.
Yeah, it's a very, very tough one. I also think, is Robertson doing brilliantly because Mane is not there ball hogging and ruining it for him?
That is an interesting question. You've always got that issue with Mane, haven't you? And his reluctance to let go of the ball.
Liverpool. He had a brilliant game against Arsenal this season, but aside from that, he's been a shadow of the player he was a few years ago, and he's been quite poor for a good 18 months now. I also think the new striker that we've got in, or new guy we've just brought in from Porto, he basically plays as left wing. So I think he's been brought in as a Mane replacement. So I think Mane is, he's not an FPL asset, nowhere near, but I think he's going to be on the way up. But while he's playing, I think he's a detriment to owning Robertson. I'm talking myself out of doubling up on Liverpool. I don't know why, but I'm really talking myself out of it. Cool, let's move on before I do end up talking myself out of it, because I do want to own Robertson at some point. The next team is a very interesting one to talk about. It's Manchester City. So I think with Manchester City, you need to own Cancelo.
Yeah.
You just need to own Cancelo. It's like Trent and Cancelo are the must-haves all year in FPL. I don't think I started with Cancelo. I brought him in on that game week 3 or 4. But he's been a must-stay in my team ever since. There's been times when people have benched him, and I've always said, why are you benching one of the best players? And he's got 18 points against United or something like that. He's just an absolute FPL dream, and he needs to stay in the team all the time. I've also at the moment got Phil Foden, and I guess my issue here is that I've got Phil Foden because I don't see anyone better in that price bracket considering it's City, who are fixture-proof, but the fixtures are nice. Are there any other players that you would consider or anyone else you're looking at, or do you completely disagree around Foden? As much as I'd love KDB, he's too expensive. So I'd just love to get your thoughts.
No, I've currently got Bernardo, which has been frustrating because basically since I've got him in, he's done nothing. But he did have a real purple patch probably about 6-7 weeks ago now. Like you say, De Bruyne, obviously fantastic, but he's just too expensive at the moment. So I don't think you can really justify bringing him in. Cancelo's you must have. The issue you've got is it's always Pep Roulette, isn't it? And you've got Foden, you've got Sterling, De Bruyne, Bernardo, Mahrez, Gundogan, Grealish. Like, how do you fit all those into a side? So there's going to be someone missing out all the time, and he does like to chop and change things. So you've just got to go for who you think is most likely to start more consistently, because when they do start, like you say, they're fixture-proof. So no matter what, there's always a chance of points there.
I think I was listening to the Always Cheating podcast, who are looking over Kings of the Game Week on FPL, and 2 weeks in a row, there were 5 City attackers, and they were completely different from one week to the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Best players of the game week, 1 week, 5 City players, the next week, another 5 City players. And it was just, you just can't tell who's going to play. Mahrez is a perfect example. When he plays, he'll score and get assists, but then you've got him competing with Sterling, Foden. It's just such a difficult... I think the one guy that is fixture-proof there is KDB, but just he doesn't deliver enough to justify the price tag, which is the issue with him. So I think you're right there, and you summed it up quite nicely.
Yeah.
Next one is Manchester United, who I think we all got quite a lot of Man U players at the beginning of the year. I think we all started with Luke Shaw, which went down brilliantly for all of us. But talk to me about United, and more importantly, what you think of United right now after their FA Cup knockout yesterday.
They are so hard to predict. Like I say, I've got Dele in my team at the moment. I've also got Ronaldo in my team at the moment, but I can't get rid of Ronaldo quickly enough, especially to make up for that money to bring Salah back in, sort of in the next week or two. So, but other than that, obviously Fernandes hasn't performed to the levels he did last year, especially when he first came in, and he just sort of tore the league up. I had high hopes for Sancho at the start of the season, but again, not really performing. The only one I'm looking at the moment that I'd probably keep is Dele, purely because he's so cheap and he seems to be consistently starting. And if they do find a bit of form and can keep clean sheets, then he's a good asset to have. The other person that obviously like you've got is De Gea.
I've got him as a stopgap because Arsenal have got blanks, but I will be bringing in Ramsdale for De Gea. I don't think De Gea is a long-term asset at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, I just think there's no real... And it's hard to say. It seems weird to say this for a team that have got as much talent as Man United and are currently sat in 4th in the league. Like, I don't see who I can really bring in. Rashford hasn't been performing. Pogba's been injured, and Pogba's just like Pogba, so you don't bring him in. And obviously, the less said about Mason Greenwood, the better.
Let's not touch on that today.
So I just don't see where the value is there.
The next 5 fixtures are Burnley, Southampton, Brighton, Leeds, and Watford.
But they just got knocked out of the FA Cup by Middlesbrough, and they were playing a strong team. They had Ronaldo, Sancho, Rashford, Pogba. Like, they basically went out almost full strength. They couldn't beat Middlesbrough.
Has Rashford gone down the Dele Alli route now? I think it's time. We all love Marcus Rashford for what he's done off the pitch, but on the pitch, he's completely gone.
He's fallen away so much. He needs to pick it up, and I don't know. I mean, does Rangnick probably only be there?
He needs to leave United if you want.
Rangnick probably won't be there past the end of this season. He's only there as an interim manager. Who do they bring in next? Could be interesting to see. Can they get the best out of him? But yeah, he needs to up his game.
Yeah, I'm like you, by the way. Ronaldo, I've got in. I'm captaining him against Burnley because he can pull 12 points out of nothing.
Yeah.
But as soon as Salah's back available, I can't swap them out fast enough. So I'm in the same boat as you there. Next team to talk about, because we could do a whole podcast on Man U alone. Newcastle. And I'm going to say it. Alan St. Maximin is Mo Salah aside, Alan St. Maximin is my favourite player in the Premier League.
Oh.
He is
It's a big shout.
So much fun to watch. He's always taking people on. He's always very positive. He's always just running with the ball and teasing defenders. I love watching him play. He's so much fun. He's surrounded by dross, is my issue. And I don't think Newcastle are investable at all. They've got the new signing who's a box-to-box midfielder, meant to be very good. I've not seen him play much. But apparently he creates a lot. The problem is with Newcastle, they're relying on people like Chris Wood to finish it off. And the less said about Chris Wood, the better, I think. What are your thoughts on them at the moment, given the influx of cash and players?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they perform now and how they integrate these new signings into their side. They've got Target and Burn at the back. Obviously, they've got this Bruno Guimaraes, as you say, who, again, I don't know a lot about either. And, of course, Wood up front. I think Wood is, for them in this situation, a good signing in terms of someone that can keep them up.
Santa Cruz with City, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's got real vibes of that. I wouldn't be investing in anyone right now, but I think they're worth keeping an eye on. I like Eddie Howe as a manager. I think he did really good things at Bournemouth. I don't think he's the long-term Newcastle manager. Past this season, probably. I don't think they're going to give him a war chest in the summer to spend. He's basically there to keep them up this season and then hope for the best. That they can get a big name in the summer. But in terms of their assets right now, nothing really jumps out at me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think their fixtures aren't wonderful. So I think it's an easy pass in Newcastle. One other fun player that I think could be quite good, especially if Guimaraes plays as more of a defensive player, could be quite fun to own, is John Joe Shelvey.
No, never.
Lord Voldemort himself. Just... if he's utilised in a more attacking midfielder position, he could, and it's a very big could, start picking up points. Now, I don't see myself bringing him in, but one to watch, I think.
One to watch. Almost every time I bet on a Newcastle game, I back him to get booked, and it never happens. And then every other week that I don't bet on him, he always gets booked. So
you've really got a hatred of John Joe Shelby, don't you?
I'm not a big fan.
Cool. All right, Harry Potter. We'll move on to Norwich.
This will be a quick one.
I just don't have anything to say about Norwich. Yeah, they won 3-0 against a terrible Watford side, but I just can't imagine owning any Norwich players even being remotely fun. So I'm just not interested in any of them, really. Is there an argument you can make for any of them?
Nope. But, I mean, obviously, we all loved a Pookie party once upon a time, but...
yeah, that's long gone, though.
Those days are well behind us. The only player that really impressed me when they played West Ham a few weeks ago was Adam Eder, who is one of their strikers. He's 4.9, and he's got 5 and 9 in their last 2 games. He is the only player that I look at especially when they're playing against us, and think, you know what, he actually looks like a good footballer. But they're such a bad side, I still wouldn't even touch him.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we can move that on quite quickly then. I think the next team, I feel pretty similarly. Looking at Southampton, just because their fixtures are awful. They've got Tottenham, United, and Everton and Norwich after that 2 easy games. But I just don't see anyone in Southampton that's investable. Do you?
No. I had Adam Armstrong quite a bit at the start of the season. I thought he was coming in from Blackburn, where he's had a couple of good seasons.
Broja.
Yeah, Broja is a good player, but I just don't think... I mean, yeah, he's cheap at 5.2, but I don't think he's going to be doing enough, especially with Adams as well. Like, they've got 4 strikers. Long's barely played, so we won't talk about him, but the other 3 strikers share a lot of minutes. So it's one of those, again, that is hard to really predict who's going to get the most game time. Probably Broja. I think he's a good player, but I mean, I just want to go back to the start of the season.
Look at the price bracket, because he's in the same bracket as King and Denis. So,
yeah. Don't get me wrong. I think he's not a bad shout at all. But I wouldn't be rushing to bring him in. Maybe for Denny, but I just want to go back to when Lord Livra was our saviour at the start of the season.
So I didn't own him at all this season, or Tsimikas actually. And I think after 3 games, everyone went Tsimikas to Livramento.
Yeah,
and that's where I missed the trick, because I started out with Jota, who played well, but I feel like, when you just feel like you missed the boat. I'm going to really struggle to.
And more importantly, you missed out on the fun.
Yeah, Lord Livra, very fun player. Next team to speak about after Southampton is your favourite team, your second team, many people would say, in the Premier League. It's Tottenham Hotspur. Go on, give us your thoughts.
I mean, Kane's been rubbish, so you can't touch him. Over 12 million. Don't even talk to me about that. Yeah, the person that I've only really had in is Son. He's been their most consistent player, but again, he's sort of in that premium midfielder range. So it's, especially when Salah's back, it's going to be very hard to be able to fit both of them in if you want to be able to spend much money elsewhere. The other options you've got, obviously, is a lot of their fullbacks, especially since Conte's coming and playing that back 3 with 2 wing backs. So you've got Reguilon, maybe Emerson, or Tanganga, depending on who's playing out of them. So they've got some nice-ish looking fixtures coming up. So Reguilon could be one to watch again, but I just feel like every time I get him in, he does nothing and he's really annoying.
See, I really like Reguilon, and I've enjoyed owning him, because as soon as Conte signs, I brought Reguilon in and he got 6, 9, 12, 6 or something like that. I've got him now. I was actually looking at potentially selling him for Laporte, but because they've got the double coming up in 26, I think I'm going to hang on to him. I think he is their best asset at the moment to own. Son is obviously injured and it's difficult to justify. You're right, I agree with Kane. I just don't think you can touch him with a barge pole.
The one thing I want to say about Reguilon, which is, how could I forget? I captained him against Norwich. He got booked and then went off injured after 20 minutes. And I can't go back there, Tom. I can't do it again.
That's a curse you just can't escape now. He's for the rest of the season, at least, for you. Well, I've really enjoyed owning Reguilon, so
I'm glad you have.
His good form will continue as long as you don't bring him back in.
I'll bring him back in just to spite you.
I mean, if you're trying to play offensively, given how far behind you are, then that may not be the best choice.
Oh.
Shots fired. Next team is a very fun team. Right. I'll give it to Watford. They're a fun team. I think Denis has been great this season. King has been great in patches and underlying stats, and they've been fun players to own. I didn't own Sarr, but he was a fun player at the beginning of the season. But you can't go near anyone at Watford at the moment, right?
No, like you say. I mean, I missed the Emmanuel Denis party, and I was really late to it. And then when I did bring him in, obviously it's all gone very wrong. But he was the only one that throughout Watford side, like if they were going to score goals, he was going to be involved somewhere along the line. So he was the only person that was ever really not nailed on. But if you were going to go for anyone, it would probably be him. Obviously, you've gone for King because of those underlying stats, which isn't a bad shout either, especially now that Denis suspended. So that's not a bad shout at all.
I'm not married to Josh King, though. Like, I'm not married to the idea of keeping Josh King. I would happily get rid of him if there was even potentially for Broja in a few weeks' time when Southampton fixtures get better. King's there as a placeholder for me at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't go near the defenders. Haven't kept a clean sheet all season, or they haven't kept a clean sheet for their last 6 Premier League managers. So like, you can't go near them defensively. The only person people will go in for is Foster because he's dirt cheap. So and he plays a lot. So that's the only real person that people will look at.
Yeah, and I think the 2 strikers are good picks because of the price, but other than that, there's not really much more to say around Watford. And who knows?
Especially now Roy Hodgson's come in. I don't know how that's going to go.
They're going to dry up completely, aren't they? Maybe since his retirement, he's a new man and an attacking manager. Who knows? We'll have to find out. Just a couple more to rattle through. Good, we've been going for a while now, so let's go through these, then talk about what we're going to do for the next game week. So the next one, I mean, we can skip right past this, can't we? It's West Ham.
Yeah, rubbish. Don't need to talk about it.
So I'll give my thoughts on West Ham first because you don't have any bias at all attached.
Nope.
I currently own Bowen and Antonio. Antonio, brilliant at the beginning of the year, but unbelievably frustrating to own at the moment. The problem is his fixtures are so good I can't drop him. When they turn, I intend to, unless he picks it up. But at the moment, there's not really anyone else in that bracket to consider. So if DCL starts picking up some form, I just don't think I can move off him. He's been a fixture in my team, not because I want him there, but because of the lack of options there. Bowen, I think we all captained for that double, and we're all glad to. I'm looking at captaining him over Ronaldo potentially this week as well, just because they've got Watford. But I think he has really come into the fore. As Ben Rama's dropped, Bowen's picks up. So I think they're both really good to own. I've owned Soufal bit parts as well this season. So I think West Ham at the moment are a really good FPL team to be investing in and a really fun team this year because they're cheap and they get a lot of points. So what am I missing? You watch West Ham more than me. What am I missing?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Antonio, like you say, so frustrating. Not just from an FPL perspective, but from an actual footballing perspective, he can be genius. He can be unplayable, but he can also be an absolute donkey at times as well. So
rubbish for a few weeks.
I think the one person obviously is Bowen. People, I think if you haven't got Bowen in your side at the moment, you're completely missing out. So he is the one person, especially at that, what he's currently at. How much? 6.9 to bring him in now. But
really? Wow.
That's what his current value is, yeah. He's been jumping up, especially with those, like you say, that double game week where he was captained. He's our player. He touches a lot on set pieces. He's fast, he's direct, he's attacking. And he's been our best player this season. The only other people that you mentioned, like you could argue to bring in if you did want to triple up, would be one of the wing backs. So Soufal or Cresswell. Cresswell, again, has been very good with his set pieces, his delivery from wide left as well, from open play. So he's always there or thereabouts when it comes to assists. We've been struggling a bit defensively in terms of clean sheets. So you're looking at anyone that can get you an assist, and that's probably Cresswell over Soufal. But yeah, I think, like I say, we're a fun team at the moment. We are making things happen. We're fifth in the league. I mean, in February, whoever would have thought it. The only thing about, obviously, we play on Tuesday evening, and we play today in about half an hour. And Bowen we're against Kidderminster, and Bowen's playing. So we'll be interested to see how he pulls up. He's the only one out of any of those that we've mentioned there that is playing. So it'll be interesting to see how many minutes he gets. Antonio is not in the squad. He's away on international duty with Jamaica. Cresswell's on the bench. Soufal's on the bench. So it'll be interesting. But Bowen just seems to play and play and play, and he's just full of energy. So I think he'll be all right.
Yeah, I really like Bowen. I think he's a really good player. And if you don't own him at the moment, you are missing out. I think.
And it's unfortunately for Bowen, I think if he wasn't in the time where England have so many good players in that position, I think he should be knocking on Southgate's door.
I'd have him over Bukayo Saka any day of the week. At the moment, given current form, I think he is probably barging that door down. The other one, it's the last team, but I don't think there's really much to say here, just because the fixtures are awful. And that's Wolves, who are doing very well, especially defensively, but their next games are Arsenal, Tottenham, Leicester, Arsenal, West Ham away.
Yeah.
There's just... Jimenez just hasn't been there. Traore is just... Oh, he's at Barcelona now, isn't he?
He's now gone to Barcelona, yeah.
Defensively, I think there is something to be said over the last few weeks, but I think with those fixtures, you just can't touch Wolves with a barge pole at the moment. I mean, are you seeing anything I'm not?
No, I completely agree. Like you say, the only ones you'd really be looking at were anyone defensively, whether it be Cody or Saïs or Kilman. or even like Nori, he's been injured a little bit, but he's apparently back fit now. But I don't think, like you say, those fixtures, you wouldn't be looking at them. The only thing that annoyed me was I had Coutinho in for a few weeks when their fixtures were nice, and then I took him out, and he's got 2 goals in the last 3 games since I took him out. So really like that. Cheers.
Always the way. Well, just to end on a slightly more positive note then, we are currently looking at doing one of these towards the end of every game week, going through the different games. They won't all be like this or this long in terms of the podcast. We obviously just wanted to give you an overview of our thoughts. Any closing thoughts on anything people need to be doing, aka get Bowen, get Salah, get Rafinha? Anything else I'm missing?
I think that's the main thing at the moment, isn't it? Obviously, Salah is a must-have when he's back from African Cup of Nations. I think Bowen is also a must-have in that price range. But, I mean, I'd also say Dean's probably with their fixtures at the moment, he's probably one of the first names on your team sheet, and then one of the Liverpool defenders at least. But other than that, I think this is the most, like, the season of recent seasons where there's more scope for mixing your teams up a little bit more, whereas in previous years a lot of people would have basically in the 15 players in their squad you'd have about 10 of the same players across the board, so it's making it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, that's it from us for this week. What we'll do is have one of these at the end of every game week, just to review the game week, look at our teams and look at our initial plans for the upcoming week. You can find us on Twitter. So, Matt, do you want to give the details around that?
Yeah, we are at Big at the Back on Twitter. Obviously, only just started, so we are looking at building up our following. Obviously, I'll be, particularly myself, will be on Twitter with a lot of updates, tweeting about all things FPL and football in general. So, yeah, come and give us a follow.
Yeah, we say tweeting, complaining is probably
mainly.
But we'll definitely try to make it fun at times. Look, thanks anyone that has got through this long. I know it's been 80 minutes. And thanks, Matt, for joining. And we'll look forward to speaking to you all next time.
Cheers.